Welcome to Book by Book, everybody. Tonight we are going to be reading Isaiah 15 through 17. And these are kind of shorter chapters. And part of the reason why we're doing shorter chapters is because I just didn't have time to get into 18. And so as I was researching, I was kind of bummed that I was kind of time constrained this week because 17 and 18 kind of go together in different scholars looking at them as a unit, but it'll be all right. It'll be there when we get back to it. So the section that we're in is the warnings, the woes, the oracles concerning the nations. And in the last couple chapters, we looked at the warning against Babylon, which again is an interesting thing because Babylon is not the world power that they are going to be during the life of Isaiah, and then moved to the Philistines. And now we're going to start continuing working with the close neighbors of the kingdom of Judah. And so we're going to look at Moab and Damascus, and with Damascus, which is Syria, we're going to see connections with the northern kingdom of Israel. And those connections are significant because the northern kingdom of Israel was fighting against the southern kingdom of Judah and allying themselves with Damascus. And so that's part of why Israel is lumped in with this warning against Damascus. And part of the challenge here, there are some different scholars who wonder if these oracles are taken out of time, like they're not in chronological order. But they were later compiled all into this one piece as trying to give a theme of Isaiah's warnings to the nations. That's a possibility. If it ultimately, the date of these different oracles is not the most important thing. The most important thing as we walk through these is to recognize that God is sovereign over the nations. And there are no nations that God is unaware of what they're up to. And so God is sovereign over the nations. He knows what they're doing. But even in the nations that are antagonistic towards the people of Israel, or the Hebrew people, the Lord still has invitations for them to repent. Part of the purpose of the oracles more often is not to say you will be destroyed, definitely every single person wiped out. That's not the purpose. The purpose is here's this warning, and how are you now going to respond? And so even when we look at Jonah, which again, I love Jonah. Jonah is a great summary picture of what the prophetic role really is about, because at the end of Jonah, he goes and he finally confronts Nineveh. 40 days and Nineveh will be overturned, and then he leaves and he sits on the hillside and pouts. That part's not so much what the prophets are about, but the end, when God doesn't destroy Nineveh because they heard the warning and they repented, Jonah's upset. Did God lie to Jonah and through Jonah in this action? No, because what does overturning mean? Overturning does not necessarily mean 40 days and Nineveh will just be a pile of ash, because overturning could also be your wickedness will be overturned. And so that's what's happening in the city of Nineveh through Jonah's ministry is their heart of the wicked hearts of the people of Nineveh. They hear the warning, they repent. And that is the key piece for the prophetic ministry. And so even though we are going to read through here and we're going to see, Damascus, you are going to be destroyed. That's in here. The goal is still that the people who hear that message would turn and trust the Lord. And so God does not want to destroy all the nations here he wants the people to hear the warning and respond. So With that said, let's jump in to chapter 15, a prophecy against Moab. And Moab, I'm getting real far. Moab is the like a cousin nation to the people of Israel. If you remember in Genesis, Lot's daughters were impregnated by Lot through schemes, and one of the daughter's sons is the father of Moab. And so Moab is connected to the people of Israel because Lot is Abraham's nephew, right? So they're cousins. And they are also, Moab is also the place where Ruth is from. And Ruth is the great grandmother of David. And so Moab is often, they have a kind of friendly relationship. There are different times where Israel or the king of Judah is ruling over the region of Moab. There are areas of Moab that are contested between the two kingdoms. And so there is conflict, but there is also relationship. And when we read in here a prophecy against Moab, the word prophecy can also be translated as burden, a burden concerning Moab. And so when we read these, it might be helpful to think to remember, Isaiah isn't relishing in this message. He's not receiving this word from the Lord and saying, "Oh, I'm going to go tell him." But he is carrying a burden to warn them, a responsibility that they would hear God's message. And so let's continue. Ar in Moab is ruined, destroyed in a night. Kir in Moab is ruined, destroyed in a night. Dibon goes up to its temple, to its high places to weep. Moab wails over Nebo and Medeba. Every head is shaved and every beard cut off. In the streets they wear sackcloth. On the roofs, in the public squares, they all wail, prostrate with weeping. Heshbon and Eleah cry out. Their voices are heard all the way to Jahaz. Therefore, the armed men of Moab cry out, and their hearts are faint. So all these different places are cities and regions in Moab, and Assyria is the dominant power in the region right now. And Assyria did come and do damage throughout Moab as they were doing all of their conquering of the region. And so these different places were destroyed quickly by Moab. And so the people are reacting. And the language here that we see, all of the stuff that's happening in Dibon, they go up to the temple, to the high place to worship, to pray, and they're wailing, but nothing is helping. Nothing is happening. And so the imagery of every head shaved and every beard cut off, wearing sackcloth, these are all the acts of those who are mourning, who are in grief. And so that's the picture of what's happening in the nation of Moab. This is a hard sin that they are experiencing, and they need to, just recognizing that your neighbors are grieving is a significant part of being faithful to the Lord. And so Isaiah sees that all these things are going badly for the people of Moab. And then in verse 5, picks up with, my heart cries out over Moab. Her fugitives flee as far as Zoar, as far as Eglath Shelishiyah. They go up the hills to Luhith, weeping as they go. On the road to Horonaim, they lament their destruction. The waters of Nimrim are dried up, the grass is withered, the vegetation is gone, and nothing green is left. So the wealth they have acquired and stored up, they carry away over the ravine of the poplars. Their outcry echoes along the borders of Moab. Their wailing reaches as far as Eglaim, their lamentations as far as Bir Elim. The waters of Dimon are full of blood, but I will bring still more upon Dimon, a lion upon the fugitives of Moab, and upon those who remain in the land. And so as we are reading here, my heart cries out. And one of the questions is, who is the my here? Who is it Isaiah crying out for the refugees of Moab? Or is it the Lord crying out for the refugees of Moab? And the language so far has been like, this is the Lord's word to the nations. And so the simple reading would then be, the Lord is crying out. The Lord is grieving for the people of the nation of Moab as their region has been destroyed. And these refugees are fleeing, and they're going from the list of places that we know of are going from north to south. Some of these places we don't really know where they are. But we do know that the trajectory is the northern parts of Moab to the south. So they're trying to escape down towards the Red Sea, and towards like Egypt and Arabia, like that area down there, because Assyria is coming from the north. And so they're on the run. And there's great grief and weeping. They're trying to take all of their wealth that they can hold on to with them. But they are refugees. And the land itself is also being used up. And so part of the war machine of the empire is using up the resources of the nations that they're conquering. And so they are they might be diverting streams. They might be using up all the pasture land for feeding horses and their any plunder and cattle that they take. They're using all the grazing land. And so everything is drying up. And then there could also be a drought and famine are also a common occurrence in this time. So everything is, not only are they refugees, but the land itself is starting to wither around them, which is significant because the land of Moab was actually good grazing land. And when you read through in Numbers as they're going up, they're hoping to go through the land of Moab to go into the land of Canaan. But the Moabites were like, no, you can't come through. So they had to go all the way around. And one of the reasons they didn't want them to come through was because it's like, you've got people of Israel, you've got all your cattle, we've got all our cattle, and we don't want your cattle using up all of our grazing land as you're walking through. And so Moses was like, we're going to just stick to the road, right? But that doesn't work when you have like 1 million people walking through a city. Like they don't, and all their cattle, they're not just going to stick to the road. So everything is going badly for Moab. And there's also an interesting piece here in verse 9. The waters of Dimon are full of blood, but I will bring still more upon Dimon. And in English, we don't see this, but if you look down if you have a Bible, a print Bible, there may be a little footnote on Dimon where it says Dimon, a wordplay on Dibon. It sounds like the Hebrew for blood. And so the waters of blood are full of blood is part of like what they are trying to, like what the Lord is trying to communicate, like what was pure and clean, like the warfare and the violence has affected even the water. And so if you listen to Dave Matthews Band, there's a song, Don't Drink the Water, There's Blood in the Water. That's what I thought about all afternoon because it's an intense song and it makes you feel. So that's the picture that we have of Moab at this time. And so the timing is probably around 715, 714 is where people kind of put these events for Moab. So whether or not this is when Isaiah is saying these things or before that, we're not totally sure. But Moab is kind of in that range going through their own crisis. So in 16, then, we get a tone shift and a perspective shift of the refugees trying to figure out what should we do. And so that's where it picks up in verse 16:1. It is now like the leaders of Moab speaking to themselves, trying to figure out a plan, like how can we survive? So let me just real quick, got a thing happening over here. All right. So verse 1, send lambs as tribute to the ruler of the land from Selah across the desert to the mount of daughter Zion. Like fluttering birds pushed from the nest, so are the women of Moab at the fords of the Arnon. Make up your mind, Moab says. Render a decision. Make your shadow like night at high noon. Hide the fugitives. Do not betray the refugees. Let the Moabite fugitives stay with you, be their shelter from the destroyer. The oppressor will come to an end, and destruction will cease. The aggressor will vanish from the land. In love, a throne will be established. In faithfulness, a man will sit on it. One from the house of David, one who in judging seeks justice and speeds the cause of righteousness. So these refugees now are reaching out to the people of Judah, saying, let's send lambs to the nation as tribute to, like, put ourselves in subservience to Judah, who the Lord has protected and preserved in this time so that they may protect us. So they're reaching out. They are, they're like this fluttering birds, like their nest has been destroyed. They've been pushed out. They have nowhere else to go, nowhere they can land safely. So they're looking for home. And so they're reaching out to Judah and asking for that protection. And then in verse 4, there is this kind of this aside, verse 4 and 5, where now we are brought back into the Lord's perspective on this and saying, there will be a day when the oppressor will no longer be working in this region. And then there's this promise of a faithful man who will sit on the throne of David. So there's this messianic imagery here. So the king at the time, most likely Ahaz, probably not the guy that they're talking about, probably not the person that they're looking to. And so, because ultimately Judah will not welcome in all of Moab, but there's a day coming when there will be a leader who will be a shelter to the nations, who will be bringing in the refugees and the downtrodden and the marginalized. And so this is the one who we look to bring justice, to bring righteousness. And ultimately, as Christians, like, we look back and, like, there could be a really good king in a couple generations who might do something like this from the people of Israel's perspective. But we look back and we see ultimately this son of David, like, this is Jesus. This is fulfilled in Christ, who brought all of the nations into the family of God through his blood and through his death and resurrection. He's made place for all of us to find protection in the shadow of his wings. And so, yeah, so that's like a interjection. Like, it's bad now, but God sees there is a plan coming to bring a rescuer. Verse 6 then shifts to Judah's response. So we've got kind of some hopping around. So we've got Moab going, what are we going to do? Let's reach out to Judah. And then the Lord saying, there is going to be a good king. And then Judah's response in verse 6. We have heard of Moab's pride, how great is her arrogance, of her conceit, her pride, and her insolence. But her boasts are empty. Therefore the Moabites wail, they wail together for Moab, lament and grieve for the raisin cakes of Kir Hareseth. The fields of Heshbon wither, the vines of Sibmah also. The rulers of nations have trampled down the choicest vines, which one reached Jazer and spread toward the desert. Their shoots spread out and went as far as the sea. So I weep as Jazer weeps, and the vines of Sibmah, Heshbon and Eleah. I drench you with tears. The shouts of joy over your ripened fruit and over your harvests have been stilled. Joy and gladness are taken away from the orchards. No one sings or shouts in the vineyards. No one treads out wine at their presses, for I have put an end to the shouting. Somewhere in here, the Lord started speaking again. For I have put an end to the shouting. My heart laments for Moab like a harp, my inmost being for Kir Hareseth. When Moab appears at her high place, She only wears herself out. When she goes to her shrine to pray, it is to no avail. So the people, like, we've heard of Moab's pride. We see their fallenness. We see their brokenness. We're not going to be a part of them. And that leads back to the Lord lamenting and grieving for the people. Like your once flourishing land of Moab has been trampled. And if we go back to the Lord's warning to the people of Israel, like that's the same kind of language that was given to the people of Israel. The oppressor has trampled the land. And that's what the empire, the Assyrian Empire, was doing, was trampling and destroying these lush vineyards and all of this. Empire's terrible. Like if you read through the Bible and you ever are like, yeah, empires, they're a good idea, you're reading the Bible entirely wrong. Like nowhere in the Bible is empire ever thought like this is a good thing. And so just something to keep in mind. And yeah, so the Lord is grieving. And so when we read a prophecy against Moab and we read it as a burden concerning Moab, the burden is on the prophet communicating this message, but it's also a burden on the Lord, because the Lord did not create humanity to curse humanity. The Lord's desire is to bless. And it is the sinfulness and rebellion and wickedness and pride in people's hearts that leads to these conflicts between nations and leads to one nation trying to oppress another nation and leads to war and to rejecting your neighbor because, well, they were mean to us before, so we're not going to welcome them now. Like that's sin. And that grieves the Lord. And so the people here, Moab's days are numbered is part of what we should recognize that's going on here. And even as they go up to the high places, they pray to their high places, to their idols, and they just wear themselves out. And 2 Sundays, we're going to talk about worry in the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus says, don't worry about food and clothes, for the Lord knows, right? But one of the things he says in there is the pagans chase after these things. And Kate's going to talk this Sunday. She's going to be talking about the previous section in the Sermon on the Mount about treasures in heaven. And the Lord, Jesus says in that section as well, like the pagans worry about these things. And it's very easy from our context to think, well, pagans are unbelievers. But pagans are people who have faith in the ancient world. Their faith is just misdirected. And so they're running after all kinds of things. And so the people of Moab going up to their high places are not people without any kind of faith. But what we should read here is their faith is failing because it's in emptiness. It's in these idols that can't actually save. But they go up and they waste their time and their energy and they're wearing themselves out. And this is part of the problem in our culture even now, as people have all these idols and they give themselves over to work, to success, to money, to pleasure, to whatever, to say, this is what's going to actually like make my life meaningful. This is what's going to save me. And ultimately they wear themselves out, crying out to nothingness. And so this is the despair that the people of Moab are in. Now, I am a grown man who was once a junior high boy. And so when I come across interesting things in the Bible that are kind of gross, I got to point them out, because you can take a boy out of junior high, but you can't take junior high out of the boy. And so when we read in verse 11, my heart laments for Moab like a harp. Now, this is just a fun little detail here. When we read the word heart in the Bible, we should translate that in our brain to emotion center. Okay. Now, we in our Western our world and our context, we think of our hearts as our emotion centers, right? And part of that is like when you are excited, You can feel your heart speed up, right? And so that's our emotion center. But in the ancient world, the emotion center was the bowels. And we can make sense for that, right? Because when you're nervous, how many of us have ever been nervous and we got some tummy troubles, right? So my bowels moan for Moab. That's just an interesting imagery, right? Like I might be getting sick. I might have an express route situation here over my grief for the city of Moab. And one of the reasons why, yes, it's gross to think about like getting intestinal distress in the Bible, right? But the Bible is a book written to people, and people have these experiences. And when we read about the Lord, like the Lord does not have intestines, right? Yahweh doesn't get diarrhea. But when the Lord tries to communicate to him the kind of distress that he feels over what the people of the world are going through, he uses imagery that we can understand. And so like when we are distressed over a friend or a family member who's going through great pain and it affects our bodies in different ways, like that's the kind of pain that the Lord is experiencing for the people who are suffering. And so I find that beautiful, even though the imagery is gross. The idea is beautiful, that God wants us to relate to him, and so he relates to us. And so he condescends to our level and says, like, you know how you couldn't sleep for like a week because your friend was going through a divorce, and you're like, I just don't know what to do about that. Like God's like, I understand that. I understand that kind of anguish. And when you are too stressed to eat, and because you see the chaos in the world and it's like affecting you, I understand that. But when we get to the New Testament and the Lord says, don't worry about food and clothes, part of it is like, yeah, the Lord understands what it is to experience this grief and this distress, but he doesn't want us to live there, doesn't want us to stay there. So he invites us to bring these things to him and surrender them to him and trust that if God cares about birds and flowers, he cares about me. And if he's grieved about the things and the problems of the world, then that's okay. That I also, like, I see these concerns and I don't need to ignore them, but I need to give them to the Lord who also cares, who cares more than I can even care. Like I need to surrender these to the Lord. And so while the imagery of bowels and intestinal distress, it's not pretty, it is beautiful that the Lord would communicate this to us. So anyway, I had to say, verse 13, this is the word the Lord has already spoken concerning Moab. Now the Lord says, within 3 years, as a servant bound by a contract would count them, Moab's splendor and all her many people will be despised, and her survivors will be very few and feeble. So the Lord is saying, like, this destruction is coming, and it's within 3 years. And the detail here, as a servant bound by contract would count them, that servant bound by contract, like 3 years, is you are more than halfway through your indentured servitude, like slavery in the Hebrew mind. And so you are, like, at that point, like, you're counting down. Like, I'm almost halfway through. This is almost over. Like, so that's how the Lord is saying, like, the kind of importance that a slave who sees their freedom on the other side, that's how accurate you are when you're counting down. Like, or when summer break is coming and like kids are like 21 days till break, like that kind of counting. Like how old are you? 4-ish. No, it's like 21 days till summer. Like that kind of specificity. The Lord's saying, I know exactly when this is going to happen, and it's going to happen. And it did happen. Moab is not a nation anymore. Like they were depleted and decimated, and to a place where they were just a very few group of people, but not a nation. And so that, so the Lord is saying this will happen. And yeah, again, all of this is a burden that the Lord feels for the people. So just because the Lord knows it's going to happen doesn't mean he's like, this is going to be great, right? Like he doesn't want war and destruction. Chapter 17. Now, having dealt with the Moab and the Philistines, which are kind of southern neighbors to Judah, the messages start going north to Damascus. And in looking at Damascus, which is Syria, which is north of Israel, Damascus is the capital area, a very important trade city in the region. And so when he's talking about Damascus, he's really using that as a substitute for the nation, right? Even though it's just one city, he's talking about the whole nation. And then Israel, because of their treaties and their coalition against Judah, Israel gets lumped in here as well. So let us read verse 1. A prophecy against Damascus, again, a burden about Damascus. See, Damascus will no longer be a city, but will become a heap of ruins. The city of Aurora deserted and left to flocks, which will lie down, with no one to make them afraid. The fortified city will disappear from Ephraim, and royal power from Damascus. The remnant of Aram will be like the glory of the Israelites, declares the Lord Almighty. In that day, the glory of Jacob will fade. The fat of his body will waste away. It will be as when reapers harvest the standing grain, gathering the grain in their arms, as when someone gleans heads of grain in the valley of Rephaim. Yet some gleanings will remain, as when an olive tree is beaten, leaving 2 or 3 olives on the topmost branches, 4 or 5 on the fruitful boughs, declares the Lord, the God of Israel. In that day, people will look to their Maker and turn their eyes to the Holy One of Israel. They will not look to the altars, the work of their hands, and they will have no regard for the Asherah poles and the incense altars their fingers have made. So there's this coming destruction of Damascus, and Damascus was destroyed. And Damascus is one of those weird cities that has had many empires and different nations ruling over that region. And it's still around. Damascus still exists. It's one of the oldest, longest occupied cities in the world. That and Jericho are both very long occupied. And so this burden is saying the day is coming when the glory of Damascus and the glory of Israel wrapped up together will be destroyed. And this imagery of this agricultural like harvesting, part of what's happening is there's a taking of people away. And part of what the Assyrians did was they took people into exile. And so as they gathered up sheaves of grain, so they're going to gather up people. And when they talk about the like harvesting olives, I've never seen this, and I keep thinking I should look that up. But like people would, when they harvest olives, they would put a sheet under the tree, and then they would just hit it, and the ripe olives would fall off. And so the olives that aren't yet ready to fall off, they remain. And so that's what the Lord is saying. Like there's going to be a few that remain up there, but most of them are going to come off, and they're going to be like olives when they're harvested, taken away. And so that's the image that is happening in these northern regions, like their rebellion, their violence against the people of Judah, their idolatry, all of these things are leading the majority of the people out of the land. The glory of these regions are going to be no more. And in that time, they will turn to the Maker because they realize that these idols are worthless. So just as Moab was going and praying to their idols in their high places and like nothing's happening, now the people of Damascus and Samaria are going to realize that the idols that they've been making have been failing them as well. And so they'll turn their eyes to the Maker, to the Lord. The sad thing is it takes so long for people to actually repent. Like, it didn't have to get here, right? And so we see there's this heartbreaking destruction that's coming, and we have to just remember, like, this was not necessary. This was not what God wants for any people, but it is their own sinfulness, their own rebellion and brokenness that brings this destruction their way. Let's pick up verse 9 through 14. So I'll finish out this chapter. In that day, their strong cities, which they left because of the Israelites, will be like places abandoned to thickets and undergrowth, and all will be desolation. You have forgotten God, your Savior. You have not remembered the rock, your fortress. Therefore, you set out the finest plants and plant imported vines. Though on that day you set them out, you make them grow, and on the mornings when you plant them, you bring them to bud. Yet the harvest will be as nothing in the day of disease and incurable pain. Woe to the many nations that rage. They rage like the raging sea. Woe to the people who roar. They roar like the roaring of great waters. Although the peoples roar like the roar of the surging waters, when he rebukes them, they flee far away, driven before the wind like chaff on the hills, like tumbleweeds before a gale. In the evening, sudden terror. Before the morning, they are gone. This is the portion of those who loot us, the lot of those who plunder us. So thinking about the history here, like what's happening in the world at this time, Assyria is invading. Northern kingdom is on the cusp of falling. And so the northern kingdom Samaria was destroyed in 722. All right. And so Assyria, like whenever this oracle was given, Assyria is right there doing this work. And they may have already taken them. And it could be that Isaiah is now responding to, look what the Lord has done. He's taken these people who have been rebellious away out of the land, and now it's empty. And now Assyria doesn't just stop. It doesn't like, that's enough. Empire always wants to grow. And so as we remember, the empire of the Tiglath-Pileser and Shalmaneser and all these different kings, they start working their way towards Judah. And so the people may be looking out at the Assyrian armies as they're making their way. And so while there is great grief and great pain and great fear, there's this message here in verse 12 that there's woe to the nations that rage. And that's the Assyrians. They're raging. And they sound like the rushing waters. The Brysons were just over at the ocean, and I was talking to them this evening at neighborhood table. And I love going to the ocean because I love the sound of the rushing water and how big and powerful Pacific Ocean is. And Pacific means peaceful. And I have never gone to ocean shores and thought, what a peaceful body of water. It's just so choppy and windy and but there's, you go to warmer climes and it is quite peaceful. But the army of the Assyrians is so big and powerful that's coming, and it's just like the oceans. I don't know what we can do here. If there were a tsunami, you go to ocean shores and there's all these tsunami escape routes, and I'm telling you, if you're in the city when there is a tsunami, how much time you got? Because that city is just this spit of land between Grays Harbor and the ocean, and it's if the water's coming, it's coming all the way through, right? And it's but you've got these routes, but you hear the water coming, you hear the ocean, and it can be overwhelming. And that's what the people are experiencing here. Woe to the nations who rage. They're raging, they're roiling waters coming at us. And the message here to the Lord is all that rage, all that bluster, all that's going to happen, it's going to be gone overnight. And if we remember this story, when the Assyrians come and Hezekiah is there they are, we're all going to die. And the Lord wipes them out. overnight. Like this promise here that you are afraid of this invading army that is coming, and the Lord's like, I got power over that. And so in this section, we have this warning and burden to the northern kingdoms, looking at the destruction that the Assyrians are going to bring. And the people of Judah are hearing this. They're receiving this message from Isaiah, and they're like, what can we do? How can we stand against this? And the Lord is like, I'm not worried about them. Why are you worried about them? Because Judah at this time is still the place where the Lord has chosen to let his glory dwell. So he doesn't want Assyria to come and attack the temple. And part of it is like, it's his own glory that he's protecting here. And so in a night, the wind will stop. In the evening, the terror will be upon them. Before the morning, they are gone. And that's what happened in the story that we read about in 2 Kings. We read that. And so we'll pause. We'll stop here for the text this evening. And next week we'll get into, well, not next week. We'll get into Cush and Egypt. But are there any questions for these 3 chapters that we went over this evening? Thoughts, questions, observations? In person, online?
Jason?
Yeah, Kevin.
When you talk about the heart, basically the bowels.
Yeah.
There's probably different words for heart.
Yes.
You know, like there really is a heart word or something like that. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So Kevin's question, if you're online, is are there different Hebrew words for bowels and heart, as in the organ bowels and the organ for heart? Yes. I don't know them off the top of my head, but there are different words. Yeah. And so English, like translations like the NIV are going more for thought for thought translation than word for word. And so understanding the idiom of like the bowels being the emotion center, that thought for thought translation is to say for English speakers, it would be our heart. And so, yeah, so that's the distinction. And so English is a great language, but anytime you make any kind of translation, you'll have to make choices to make it more understandable. So, because we don't necessarily think our heart and our bowels are both emotionally driven, even though they are. Like what happens with your emotions affect your body in profound ways. And so for some it's physical, like it could be weight gain, it could be weight loss, it could be heart conditions, it could be shortness of breath. Like your body, like your whole body is an emotion center. Yeah, so trying to zero in for the English speaker, like heart, like, which is also like, when we think of heart, we think of the little heart shape, right? But we don't all immediately think the different chambers of the heart pumping blood in and out and all the different things. Like the heart's gross looking. We all think like the little heart. So yeah, but there are different words to answer your question. Janet.
To clarify, is oracle interchangeable with prophet?
An oracle is a message more often than not in the Old Testament. There are like the oracles of Delphi in Greek, and those are like supernatural seer type people. But there is a word for seer in the Hebrew, and there's a word for prophet in Hebrew, and there's a word for oracle. And so the oracle is more the message that the prophet or the seer is giving. So yeah, the most common word for prophet in Hebrew is navi. And so I was very annoyed when I saw Avatar and the people are the navi. I was like, come on. Don't do that. Don't do that, James Cameron. Come on. And don't name the thing that you're all trying to get unobtainium. That's a dumb name. It's hard to get, what should we call it? Unobtainium. Anyway, that movie. Any other questions?
I do.
Yeah,
So
Carrie.
in 17, where it talks about Damascus, that's not just a city, that was an entire region.
Well, yeah, so
Am I
it's
correct in that?
Damascus is the city.
Mhm.
At the time, Aram is the country. But because Damascus is the important political trade center, Damascus is serving as a representative for the whole. And so when we talk about Damascus, what happens to Damascus is going to affect the whole region of Aram.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And when did this happen?
All of this happened around 727 to 722 BC. So,
And who were they? And they were actually taken out by.
yeah, many of the people were taken out of Damascus and Israel and taken throughout the empire. And so what
I mean, the Damascus was destroyed, and it was destroyed by which group of people?
the Assyrians.
The Assyrians. Okay,
Yeah.
so they were invaded from the north.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the like kind of the northeast. So the Assyrians crossed over the Euphrates River to come into the land where Syria and Edom and Moab and Israel and Judah, they're all there. And so the Euphrates River is the largest river that's kind of the natural barrier between
Right. No.
all of those countries and the Assyrian Empire. So
that encompassed Lebanon also. Then that original area of Lebanon would be under the area of Aram.
Lebanon was its own country.
Even then.
Yeah, its own people.
The
Yeah.
Cedars of Lebanon. That was
Right.
what it was talking about. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that encompassed all of it. Never
So
mind.
back then, Lebanon was called Tyre. So King Hiram of Tyre would send the cedars of Lebanon to Solomon to build the temple. So yeah. Oh, Carrie, you froze. So yeah, all
Sorry,
these names.
the computer keeps.
Yeah, I keep getting a note that my internet may be unstable too. So
What?
yeah, I'm sorry, Carrie, you're frozen again.
It's okay.
All right.
That was just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So all these different countries have different names now and different people living there, but the cities keep getting rebuilt, which is interesting. So, yeah, because they're important trade routes. They're important cities. And it's just amazing how much of world history really does revolve around this tiny little piece of land about the size of Rhode Island, right? Like, it's crazy. So, yeah. Any other thoughts or questions?
No, just interesting how it all comes about, how they all were taken out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is it's an interesting time for this region as they're working through all these different alliances and empires and all that stuff. So yeah.
Okay, I got one more question. So how
Okay.
far in advance did Isaiah see this fall?
We don't know.
I mean, how far in advance did he get this word from God and then it came to pass?
Yeah.
Does anybody know the exact time?
We don't know the answer. How far ahead did Isaiah get these visions? We don't know for certain how far ahead. So
Okay.
anything that we say, unless it's like unless it says something like in the year that King Ahaz died,
Oh,
this
yeah.
happened. So unless we get that kind of a message, we don't know how far ahead these messages are given. And sometimes these messages may not be like in the future. They may be responding to an event that they see happening. And so that's part of prophecy as well, is giving a God's view of the current situation. So not all prophecy is predicting the future.
No.
Sometimes it is making sense of the world from God's perspective. And so we don't know for sure how far ahead many of these different oracles are. So anytime we when I'm reading through the different commentaries preparing for this, people say this couldn't possibly be given ahead of time. And I'm like, you forget that we're talking about God here. But a lot of folks are trying to pinpoint exact times and years, and that's just kind of a fool's errand. Like, we just don't know.
You can't do it.
Yeah. So, so even Jesus telling his disciples, like, when they're asking, when are you going to establish the kingdom? And he says, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons. And sometimes we just have to get to a place where it's like, I'm not going to know that.
Nope.
So, which is hard for me because I like to know things. So,
Me too. My type A personality and all.
what's that?
Yeah, me too. My type A personality and all.
Yeah, we need to have definite, defined things. And yeah, that's just the Lord giving us growth opportunities. So, all right. Yeah, we just don't know. We don't know. All right. Any other thoughts or questions? No? All right, then. Let's wrap. Next week, I will be coming home from Idaho. So we won't be meeting next week. And I already scheduled an email reminder to say we're not meeting next week.